Hi everyone, welcome to Talks at Google. Today it is my absolute pleasure to welcome Duncan Jones, Paula Patton, and Toby Kebbell for Warcraft. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having us.
So just in case anybody isn't aware, could you explain to us what Warcraft is?
Yes. So many years ago, actually 20 years ago, a real-time strategy game came out called Warcraft that was fantastic, and I was a big fan of it, from Blizzard. 10 years ago, a game called World of Warcraft came out, which is the one that most people know about, which is this massively multiplayer online role-playing game, which supposedly over the 20 years of its existence, Warcraft that is, 100 million people have played. So very well-known computer game.
And Paula and Toby, how did you get introduced to the world of this Warcraft?
For me, it was the script. I did not know about it. I know. I was the one out, and Duncan was the one who brought me into the world, into the universe of Warcraft. I love the script, and that's why I wanted to be in the movie. And then I met with Duncan, and he showed me these incredible visuals and the art and the world he wanted to create, his interpretation of that. And I was blown away. And then we also talked about character, and we had kind of this great meeting. And in the moment, you said, "I'd like you to do it," and I said I would, and then there were lawyers, but in the moment.
And then there were lawyers. That's always like the conversation always ends up. And
that's
there
true.
Were lawyers.
You can't trust it in the moment. But we said yes, and then.
Well, I mean, Paula plays this character Garona, who's really kind of the central character in the film, in that we have these two sort of competing civilizations, Orc and human. And Paula's character Garona is kind of the one who's stuck in the middle, and so in some senses, what the audience sees is through Garona's eyes.
That's what made her so interesting to play. And then I got in my car and I went, wait a minute. I mean, I've got to be half orc, half human and green. What have I done? I don't know if I should have said yes. But then it began the most amazing adventure. It was really incredible.
And then you ended up looking like this.
Yes.
So that's not so bad.
I'll take it. A big head. Small body.
Yeah, the Durotan one was
Big
not
brain.
out yet. I'm sorry.
It's not that bad. From the back, it looks like me, though. I was like, oh, it's Durotan. It's not. I got involved because I'm speaking too loud. Is that loud? I'll hold it here. I got involved because of motion capture. I had just finished Planet of the Apes playing Cobra, and I had found out through sitting with Legendary that they were going to do a picture using the same thing, and asked, you must be tired of it. I said, no, it's an incredible craft. It's something I would love to learn more of. Who's directing? They said, Duncan Jones. I was like, no way, is that really real? And they were like, yeah. I was like, because sometimes you could go to do a job and they're like, Duncan Jones, and you turn up and it's not. It's Michael Bay.
True. There's a lot of lying in this business.
There's a lot of fibbing goes on.
Duncan Jones is my middle name.
Michael Duncan Jones Bay. So I was very lucky, and it's a phenomenal cast. And so, I also got involved. I'm a console player I have three older, that's two. I have three older brothers who are all PC gamers, and I'm very spit upon as a console gamer, It's like, you do this, do what? So I know the evil I possess in the world. So I was very excited, however, to be involved, and especially with Durotan. It was a great role, and as you said, it was the pre-world. It was that world before that we were telling the beloved world was.
And Toby, you may be sort of thinking that you were involved because of the mocap, but truly, I was excited to work with you, in particular because of the Black Mirror episode that you did, which I thought was absolutely fantastic, and that blew my mind.
Yeah, lovely.
So I'd imagine there's a great deal of sort of responsibility to the existing players, but there's also the urge to bring people who aren't necessarily as familiar, or who maybe have heard of Warcraft before. Did you find that motivating or maybe a little intimidating?
I kind of felt a responsibility I wanted to do the movie, and God, how many times in your life do you have the opportunity to make a film on this scale, creating a world on this scale? But I felt a responsibility as a fan of the game, and as someone who really wanted to see a movie not only based in the Warcraft universe, but just see a film based on a game that didn't suck. You know, look, I don't want to disrespect other people who've made movies based on games. It's an incredibly hard thing to make a movie, and anyone who actually finishes one, you know, deserves respect just for getting it made. But I felt like the emphasis of a film has to be about telling a story that the audience wants to watch, as opposed to trying to, in some way, viscerally recreating the experience of playing a computer game. That's not what a movie based on a video game needs to be. It needs to be a movie that you actually enjoy watching and characters you care about, and knowing, you know, understanding the setting of the film and understanding where you're trying to get to by the end of it.
So are you saying you are not a fan of the Super Mario Brothers movie? That is not an excellent video game adaptation?
Rob Kaczynski is constantly dissing that movie, and I think that's a little unfair.
I think one of the great things about this game in particular is that both sides have heroes. You know, it's not a black and white, like, these are the bad guys and these are the good guys. How do you sort of adapt that to cinema? Because I'm sure fans of the game and film fans are going to be torn.
I hope they are. I mean, I think what Toby and Paula do, who you know, Toby plays an orc character, Paula plays a character who's kind of in the middle of the two worlds. You know, I thought, if we're going to make this movie, one of the things that fantasy films tend to do as their trope is that the humans, the hobbits, the cute ones, those are the good guys. Everything ugly is a bad guy. Not that you're ugly, Toby. Oh, yeah. But the idea was, okay, let's make a war movie, and let's show the conflict from both sides, and let's get the audience to care about the characters on both sides, and see the heroes on both sides, and understand that this conflict arises not because there's good and bad necessarily, but because there's a situation that doesn't seem to have an easy solution, and that's why the conflict happens. The orcs have lost their homeworld. They have nowhere else they can go. They've invaded this world that's rich and fertile and has lots of space, but there happens to be a civilization which already exists there, and that's the humans and the other races which are based on Azeroth.
And Paula, I would say your character, even more so than Toby's, is caught in between the two sides. Were there any things that you drew on from, you know, obviously we don't live in a fantasy world, so method acting might be a little tougher, but were there any things that you really felt like you connected with in this?
Absolutely. I think that's what made her a character I wanted to play, because I found her to be so complex and also evolve so much, which is rare for a character to do in a movie. But I have to say, I didn't know how well and how believable it would be for us to imagine that you could watch a movie and there would not be a good guy or a bad guy, or the right being or the wrong being. And Duncan, I don't know, to me it's like very unique, don't you think, Toby? I can't remember a movie I've seen that pulled that off, and it really does work. And that's what makes this film so different, is that if your heart is not pulled by the orcs, and honestly by Toby's incredible performance, I mean, Durotan and his relationship with his family, it moves you, and you can't help but be moved. And then there's, of course, you can't help yourself because you're human and you like humans, right? I mean, most of us. I don't like all of them,
humanists.
but yeah, we're basically humanists. So then you're gonna find it. But I think I just need to say that that's really special. And so then for me, I think I also play the part that we all feel, which is that none of us sometimes, well, I won't say none, a lot of us don't feel like we belong, you know, in this world. And I know I don't.
Well, I mean, I think that was certainly a key to your character, is the sense of belonging and who deserves, who's earned your loyalty.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's, I've been born into a world of suffering and pain as the slave of Gul'dan, and then I find myself in the human world, and I'm embraced by them, but I'm not sure how much and how real it is, and you'll have
no spoilers.
More.
No spoilers.
I know, and I know exactly. I was trying, but that was my inner working. But as me, Paula, yes, life has had its challenges and its blessings, and you draw on those challenges to play a character like this.
Speaking of sort of the humanizing of orcs, there's one scene, and I hope we can talk about it, but it's the very beginning.
Oh, yeah.
And Toby, your performance is just, it's so human, and it's interesting to see these massive hulking orcs with really human emotions and like sensitivity. What was that day like for you?
Like every day, it was really, I mean, but in a good way, in the sense that every day on set was a very nurturing process of being, you know, the very lovey thing to say, but it was a very loving process, you know. It was a big group of us as orcs. We were all very happy, and a family and a team, and then even our halfling. It's like having a half sister. She's your real sister, really, but
You're not embrace me.
and I didn't get to embrace it. Isn't that unfair? It's a bad joke. So it's a process of, I think everyone's a little tired of seeing the good guy, bad guy thing. I mean, even with everything I try and do, there's, you know, everyone good can be terrible, because the behavior's the terrible thing, not the person, you know. So we were more looking at what the behaviors were of these characters. And I was lucky. I got to play with a wonderful actress who played my wife, and I was a father, so it was a very easy. A lot of my friends and older brothers are having children, so it was.
It's fun when you get to work on a scene like that. My wife is quite pregnant, and we're going to have our first kid next month. But in the scene that I think you're talking about,
yes.
Durotan, played by Toby, and Draka, his wife, played by Anna Galvin, who's fantastic. She's very pregnant at the time, and she wants to go with Durotan on this basically excursion into this new world. And he says, "Can you hide your fat belly?" And she says, "Only if you can hide your fat head." Now, these are the kind of things that I, as a husband, would love to say to my wife, but never would. So as a director, I get to write these things and say them in the film. and she knows with love that it's meant for her.
It's a true fantasy film. I'd love to talk about the visuals of the orcs, because that scene in particular really sold it for me, because I feel like you guys kept very true to the maybe more art style of the game, but you had to sort of humanize them because the game is a little more cartoony, just as a byproduct, I'm sure, of like computer rendering limitations. But this is a weird thing to notice. I was like, they have chest hair. Like, they have like realistic chest hair, but it's such a human thing. Like, and I know ILM worked on the film, and they are just real life wizards.
They did some amazing stuff. They built these simulations down to the way muscles jiggle, so that, I mean, they did huge amounts of work, especially on facial capture, and Toby could speak to that, having been through different, you know, versions of that process. But just the amount of detail they got into, whether it's the like you say, how the hair works on the body, how the hair works on the head, obviously, the muscle jiggle and fat jiggle. There was multiple layers of simulation that they were doing for every movement of every orc.
Yeah, I mean, they work tirelessly. And basically, all we are dots. At the end of the day, our image disappears, and these dots motor that incredible character that they've drawn, they've created. So we're the sort of spirit, personality element of their incredible hard work. But yeah, they work tirelessly, ILM.
Does that change your approach at all, just because you are manifesting this sort of entirely different physical character, or is it just the same way you would approach a role if your face was going to be directly translated?
The way you're trying to translate your emotions, you approach exactly the same, but you have to lose a lot of your pride. You walk around in grey pajamas all day, while everyone else is in cool armor with great swords and great facial hair. You're clean shaven in a special needs hat. It's you know, you lose your pride, but that's important, you know. So that's the only element that changes.
And Paula, I guess it was an advantage or a disadvantage, but your character has to be as physical as some of the orcs, but you didn't have the advantage of a CG, you know, being able to like have some extra muscle. So what was the training process like for this? Like, I assume it was a very physical role.
It was very it was daunting. It was challenging, but I embraced it. It was something that I ended up loving. Yes, first they wanted me to aesthetically look like I could potentially be an orc, and so that meant a lot of protein in my diet and a lot of workouts. So that was, what was it, 6 days a week, 2.5 hours a day, which was unreal at the beginning. I thought I was going to throw up. I didn't know how I was going to do it, but I just kept on. And then we added sword training and knives, and then what started to happen is the fear of how am I going to play half orc, half human, and this warrior started to kind of dwindle a bit, because this physical accomplishment I had to make, you know, for the film started making me feel like I could be a warrior a bit, you know, and not that I could do everything that Garona does, but just the idea that I could potentially do it was empowering. And then I also learned how to ride a horse, which I had never really done before. And so by the time I got to set, I'm scared to death. Still, I remember the day. Yeah, in my trailer, I was like, oh my God, I don't know. Fuck. So, but
I don't want to do this anymore.
no, I had given that much work over. I was like, someone's gonna see this body. I'm getting naked somewhere. Okay, let me tell you, that's what's gonna happen. First and foremost, bad role. I might be a bad performance, but I'm getting naked. Sorry, it's one of those. Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. It's true. But then it was also that last bit though would be they gave me tusks and these contacts that really obscure my vision, and with all of the things that I learned and everything that Duncan I talked about, the inner work and the character, and then I felt like I could go out and play her. People were like, you have to spend all those hours in makeup. It isn't fair. Or wouldn't you rather be in a pajama? And I would say no, not for me, because I love costumes. I like the way that makes you feel, and I really admire Toby and all of the orcs, quite frankly, because they do look ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous, and so much so that they just seem so other. They look like aliens that I realized I never did talk to them because they did not seem human. So to be able to come in a room in blue PJs, head to toe, I mean, you gotta see it, and blue dot, like these dots all over your face, and then pretend to be fearsome, is like amazing.
He was pretty fearsome.
He was. I'm saying he overcame that outfit and became fearsome. That's why my hat is off to him. I'm very.
It's pretty hard to
impressed.
take Clancy Brown as fearsome though when he's on a rocking horse. And he's supposed to be a huge, terrifying orc. The Kurgan from Highlander, you know, this is a guy who should be filling you with fear, and he's in his silver pajamas, rocking on a horse.
You guys have been behind the scenes. I've heard this story. You see that.
I do have to say, one thing I very much appreciated about this film is that it wasn't like a damsel in distress story, and all the women in it are very badass. So thanks for that. I'd love to talk about, so you do have so much room to play with CG and cinematography and stuff like that, but I felt like there were a lot of shots that you wouldn't expect to see in a roaring fantasy epic. Can you talk about sort of the process of working with the cinematographers? And
Yeah, I worked with Simon Duggan on this film, who had just come off of Great Gatsby. So he'd kind of been involved in something that involved a lot of special effects work and post-production and building a film in layers, which, funnily enough, we were trying not to do as much as possible. Gavin Bouquet was our production designer, and he built these extraordinary, beautiful film sets. So wherever possible, even when we were doing motion capture, we would have these live-action film sets to shoot in. But you know, there were times when we were building things in layers, and Simon and I kind of broke it down as much as we could. But the nice thing about having as many live action sets as we had is we were still able to be quite improvisational, you know, on the set. I didn't have tons of storyboards. There were animatics, but we didn't always stick to them. A lot of the time we'd get on the set and we'd break things down and we'd work out, you know what, there's a better way to do this. And we'd do that on the day. So it was kind of both unique and a little scary. Certainly scary for the producers, because we were kind of working certain things out on the day.
That's so true. That was it really was amazing. That way people have been asked me what it was like and was it really technical. And I guess it was, but I forget that bit because the sets were incredible and I didn't feel locked down like you can't move. And I had a real person to look at and feel their soul. And I don't know, right? It didn't, you did it, but more than I have ever done it. But that's what made it such an organic experience. I feel like that transcends on screen too. Just that human element, don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, I jumped the gun by saying earlier that it was like that every day. It was just every day was the same, but that's what I meant. It was so inclusive. It was like doing a full performance. The fact that we now get to stand in front of Paula or Travis or King, you know, whoever we're doing the scene with. I mean, me and Paula, we had to learn Orcish dialogue with a very specific, more specific than if you were doing, say, a European accent. They're like, no, it's like, I would love to hear the difference.
They were actual words.
That wasn't gibberish. I just said.
did you just like offend somebody's mother? Or
Clearly. But yeah, so I mean, it was absolutely like doing a great film. It was just on a massive scale. So I kept turning up and going, did we do that? How did we finish that day?
Yeah, the language stuff you guys did was really impressive. It really was. There's a scene in Hunt for Red October. I don't know if you've seen that film, you youngsters. But there's a scene from Hunt for Red October where I think it's Sam Neill who's talking Russian. We're in the submarine. It's right at the start of the movie, and he's talking in Russian. And then as the camera kind of moves in and closes in on him, he starts speaking English. It's just this really clever transition from one language to the language that the audience understands. And you know, getting rid of the subtitles, but still allowing you to feel like, oh yeah, this is happening with this group of people who don't speak English. And we kind of used that gag and elaborated on it a little bit for a meeting between Durotan and the humans, and Garona was doing the translation. So you both had a big challenge. You had a massive challenge because you were speaking 2 different fake languages and starting in one and then having to transition to the other halfway through a camera shot where Toby's speaking in Orc, and then as the camera moves in, he starts speaking in English. So the special effects stuff was difficult, but actually it's that kind of stuff that's really tricky, to try and get the timing right, to make sure that the language sounds right, and then to get the time, you know, to just do it all at the same time.
I remember being just, that moment, you know, this was a long movie to make, and I remember we've been waiting on this, and he goes, no, I want you to learn Orcish. And I was like, wait, what? And the other bit too, where it's gibberish, and then, wait, you, ADR, anybody?
Yeah.
Does want to give me that later?
And do it with these tusks in your mouth as well.
We had the meeting at the same time, and I just remember just being, okay, just fear, sweat.
Duncan, for you, so your first film, Moon, is one of my favorites of all time, and it's a very sort of
See, somebody saw it.
yeah.
Somebody saw Moon.
Several people saw it. It's very self-contained in a sense, like set and scale-wise and actors-wise, and then source code is sort of a step up from that, and then you just went completely all in. What's next?
Little film, well, little smaller film, more like source code sized. I'm going to do a film that my Don Quixote, which is this sci-fi film called Mute, that's based in Berlin, and I'm doing it with Paul Rudd and Alexander Skarsgård, and a couple of other very cool people who haven't been announced yet. But we'll be shooting that towards the end of the year.
And I'd love to know for all you, there's such a huge fan base for this. Like, what's been one of the best fan interactions that you've had so far?
From this
From this film.
From this film.
Yes.
From Mute, you should talk about Mute.
From a film that hasn't been done yet.
Yeah, no, fair enough. Just because I had a very strange occurrence. I was in Shreveport, Louisiana, and a guy came up, and his girlfriend brought him over and was like, show him, and he pulled down his pants. and on his cheek and top thigh, he had Johnny Quid as rock and roller with the guns. And he was like, you know this guy? I was like, well, yeah. I mean, I played that guy. And he would not believe it. He just, no. I mean, he was screaming and swearing off. I was like, why did you show me then? You're English. I was like, all right. Yeah,
That's amazing.
yeah, so that's, I mean, for this, no one knows yet. So that's, I think we're waiting for that. But yeah.
Yeah, I know. I don't.
The fun is yet to come.
No, yeah, I have no idea. We'll see.
We'll be doing the conventions in like 40 years' time. The three of us all sitting there, and people coming up with their Garona tattoos.
I mean, you're a toy now. There's a tiny view. Yeah. It's got to be a little surreal.
Oh yeah, I mean, of course, when you see things like that, it's unreal, absolutely. But I don't think anybody's put 2 and 2 together to have, a fan.
When the movie comes
You know
out.
what I mean?
When the movie comes out, there'll be some Google searches.
I need to get the
that
test,
we
so I can walk around with the test. Then maybe they'll
The
be
fan
it.
fiction. The
Yeah.
fan fiction is going to
Exactly,
be
yeah.
incredible.
Not that I ever.
Everyone, we have an audience mic if anyone wants to ask a question, if you guys want to line up in the middle. This might be a tough question for you, but you have a little one on the way.
Yeah.
Do you have a preference if they go Alliance or Horde?
Do I have a preference?
Yeah.
I kind of hope they go Horde, but
You heard it here.
you know what? No, I need them to be Alliance because then they're much better behaved, right?
Yeah.
Better behaved will be, Alliance.
Yeah.
Hi.
Hello.
This question is for Duncan. Moon and Source Code were amazing. And then I saw a trailer for Warcraft, and then I saw your name on it. And then I was like, what happened?
Whoa. That came out wrong, I think. Let's say that came out wrong.
Yeah, it came out wrong. What I mean is, I didn't expect that. And I didn't know what to think at first. And then, like yesterday or 2 days ago, I read something on the internet, which I'm sure is a credible source for things, that said that you were imposing all these different interesting new artistic visions on things like limiting the ILM guys to not change the expressions of the CG characters, of the mocap characters.
Yeah, don't mess with Toby's mocap.
Yeah. So
rule number 1.
So I'm interested, just what did turn you on to making a big epic film based on a video game, and then what are some other ways that you've made it your own that's different from industry standards?
Sorry.
I mean,
Yeah,
not to jump on it, but it's hard for him to say. But as an actor watching, what's incredible about a really good director at the high level is they know when to say no, not always about the yeses. And you often see Duncan in a situation with people, and it's like, I hate to use this because it's so violent, but if you're shooting a gun and someone nudges your elbow, it may be a millimeter here, but it's 2 feet off over there. So he was very good about keeping a very steady aim constantly, and that felt amazing for us as actors. I think that's very important too.
It's weird. All of Toby's metaphors involve shooting guns.
Making love.
Very
is
strange.
It works for that too.
Moon and Source Code obviously were sort of more like capsule pieces, where one's in a moon base, one's on a train, but each one of them had individual challenges. Obviously with Moon we have one actor performing with himself, and there's a technical puzzle that needs to be solved for that. Source Code had a different puzzle, which was take a loop of story, try and keep it interesting and different each time it's retold. So I've always looked for difficult projects, and with Warcraft I was a fan. I mean, I was truly a fan of all the Warcraft games right from the very beginning. I love fantasy movies. When I was growing up, I loved sci-fi and fantasy. And this was an opportunity to make a big fantasy film and hopefully try and reach the same level that I felt like Peter Jackson's original Lord of the Rings trilogy had basically set for all fantasy. But at the same time, give it its own, make a little bit more room in the fantasy genre. Because I think fantasy is a lot more constrained in what people are used to than science fiction, for instance, which has loads of subgenres.
Yeah.
So that's what we were trying to do.
I don't know anything about technical anything, but I have to tell you that it's like nothing I've ever seen before because of that. It's these vistas go on and on. At the vantage point, I keep talking. I don't know how this is, but I watched it in IMAX, and I watched it like an audience member, and I was unreal. I don't know exactly what you did, but you clearly did something different and new, and clearly the way that you feel about the CGI characters, that not knowing that, because I was kind of, don't take this the wrong way, turned on by an orc, which is, I was like, oh my God, why do I think Durotan's hot? Because they made it really real. I said Durotan.
The Brad Pitt of orcs, Brad Polk.
But the work he did to sort of push them to the limit, and I guess the nose too, and all of it, it makes it seem like something I've never seen before, and it's magnificent, really. I have to say that.
Thank you.
Truly.
I'm super excited.
Oh, good.
Without spoilers, I will say there were moments that reminded me visually of playing games, but not in a way that took me out of the film. I was just like, oh, this would be like if I was playing a Capture the Flag style one, or there were moments where I was like, yeah, this reminds me of why that type of character would make that type of attack.
It was
it was super nerdy.
I said before, if you're going to make a film based on a game, don't try and give people the same experiences playing the game, but still, as a fan and a player of those games, where there were moments for the camera to do things or to set things up in a way that are reminiscent of the experience, we tried to do it in a way that doesn't draw people who don't know the game out of the film. But it is full of Easter eggs. It is there's a lot of Easter eggs in there.
Some may think that we're approaching the end of days in our own world, with a different political.
Thanks for that.
I'm really curious how much you might have included concepts from current world events in your thinking about this world.
it's strange. We've had a lot of we've been doing a lot of press lately, and obviously we do domestic press and then you do international press. And talking to the journalists on the international press, a lot of them, especially the Europeans, have been asking, so how has the immigration situation in Europe and in Germany and France played into what you've done with Warcraft? Obviously, we were making the film 3.5 years ago, so we had no idea what the situation in Europe was going to be. But, you know, people will obviously pick up and read into things that are happening in the real world. Certainly our story follows very universal themes about the idea of one group of people losing their home and having to find a new home in a place where other people already exist. So, you know, there's that, but it's no more than that. And that existed in Warcraft lore for 20 years. That's the very premise of that universe, is that these two very, very different races have been fighting because they can't find a way to coexist.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, I'm a huge fan of Moon and source code, and I was wondering how you found working with an existing IP, both in terms of expectations from the license holders and the fans versus making your own things.
There's a certain responsibility to try and incorporate as much of the trunk of the idea of what Warcraft is and the lore and the characters as possible. At the same time, I want Paula and I want Toby and I want everyone else involved to be able to create their characters, because they're not going to feel real unless, you know, Toby knows why he's doing what he's doing and believes it and feels it. And the same for Paula, why she feels like she doesn't fit in this society or that society. So you're constantly playing you know, I'm a chief diplomat of the movie. My job is to make sure that Blizzard feel heard and that we are creating something which feels true to what they, you know, to a legacy that they have in 20 years worth of storytelling. And then also deliver a film that the studios and the producers feel like an audience beyond just the fan base is going to enjoy. And at the same time, letting my cast feel like they can additively put themselves and what they feel about their characters into the movie. So, you know, you do end up doing a lot of diplomatic work, and hopefully, you know, you get to put a little bit of your own stuff in there at the same time.
Thank you.
So 2 questions. One, because we're here at Google, I wanted to know if there's any thought of doing a source code 2 with, you know, more actual source code in it. But more seriously, this film's got a lot of CG, obviously, and a lot of world construction. As, you know, film professionals, do you guys see more of this virtual reality entertainment intersecting with what you will be expecting to do over the course of your remaining careers?
Well, you've just come off Ben-Hur, which is...
Yeah, which is all live action.
All live action.
Pretty much, yeah. We're pulling 4 real horses, that whole thing. I would like, rather, though, to speak on motion capture, because it's a funny time right now. You know, it's a very few select group of people who understand that what you do motivates that incredibly beautifully drawn, created character. So it's basically a skin that is lifeless that has the dots pressed in, speaking on the code. So the information that we give, it's not a path that's going to lead you to great fame, but it's going to be vitally important for telling these stories, because even now, I watched Nice Guys last night, and they pan over the freeway, come to him sitting in a car. They're all computer-generated cars, and that just saves a vast amount of money. So you can tell a good story without having to get 86 cars from, and that in turn can put people out of business. But you know, things need to be rendered and captured, and I think there needs to be some conversations about ownership of movement.
I had a conversation with Jeff White at ILM about, could you have, not that you'd want to, unless you wanted Ryan Gosling to play Toby Kebbell in a movie, could you have his scan and then have another actor play that body in a movie? Have we reached the point where the fidelity is so good that an actual physical person you know could be played by someone else? And they didn't have an answer, which was kind of interesting to me, that no one, I mean, I guess I guess the reason no one's done it, because the obvious choice is you hire Toby Kebbell. But I don't want to hire Toby Kebbell. I want to hire Ryan Gosling.
No one does.
But I want Ryan Gosling to play as Toby Kebbell in a movie. How can I do that? I don't know. We may never know.
Very good.
You might have just given them an idea, is what you might have done.
Well, I know we've got at least one Oscar-winning effects person here in the audience, so.
So Warcraft is a world with like a lot of lore and backstory. Like you could probably make dozens of movies across like the whole series. Was it difficult to try to explain it without spending too long, just like setting up why everyone's here and why they're doing what they're doing?
You know, I think working with Blizzard, we were able to agree early on that there was no way we were going to be able to tell this begat that, begat that, begat that, begat that story, which is what, you know, you end up with in Warcraft because they've been making these games for 20 years. So we went to what seemed the most sensible point, which is the first contact story between orcs and humans. And then we chose a very, very thin slice of that story. So this is literally the orcs are about to go through the Dark Portal. So they're about to leave their home world. We understand why they have to leave their home world, and they're invading this new world. And I think by choosing that very thin slice, we're able to fill that slice up with all of the detail that it needs to in order to feel real and to not feel like you're being shortchanged. It also actually happens to work very nicely for an audience who may know nothing about Warcraft, because it's simple enough, and I think it's a situation that an audience beyond Warcraft can understand.
And at the same time, I have a great deal of friends, and I'm like, just be patient. Hopefully there'll be more. If it's successful, your bit that you love will come along. You know what I mean? So, yeah.
We'll take our last audience question.
So I have a question about the motion capture and sort of the interaction. Do you have some thoughts on whether it's harder to play opposite a motion capture person or to be the motion capture person playing without actually having all the props and things?
I quite enjoyed working with you.
Thank you, I enjoyed it. She's a very, very dedicated, I mean, by the way, she did have strings on her back when she leapt on that horse, but I saw them slack. I'm certain I saw them slack. Very dedicated, very hardworking. I just had that, I've caught it at the right point. So from Planet of the Apes, we would do a version with the humans, 36 versions, let's say, 36 takes with the humans so that everything was technically right and they got everything, and then we'd do a clean slate, which is where the humans who are in the scene or just the sets that are in the scene are shot clean so the plate can have everything added later on.
But it's easier for you because you get to look at Paula Patton when you're
exactly. She
has to look at you in your silver pajamas.
And she can tell I'm Catholic and English.
Was it? Did you?
I didn't realize
It's tight.
they started. Go there. Okay.
Anyway, sorry.
I know.
But
Yes,
did it throw
vice
you off?
versa.
No, so that's the thing, is that, I don't know, to me it's all a game of make-believe. That's what I love about acting. And so I could easily, in my mind, go past the blue pajamas and the blue and the dots, and it didn't affect the performance for me. I mean, Toby, he was giving me this character. He was connecting to me through his eyes, through his soul, and vice versa. And so it worked. I mean, I was so thankful because honestly, I didn't know what I was getting myself into. I've never done a movie like this. I didn't know if it was going to be a tennis ball and a big blue room. I didn't know how it was going to go down. And then I was so happily surprised that it wasn't. That, yeah, I think that just like life, right? You think you don't like certain people, but you get past any of it by looking through, and you see their heart and their soul, and nothing about the exterior matters.
And I think it really helped that the producers really helped us out in that they kind of structured things so that by the time we were ready for those scenes where Paula and our other human cast were going to be interacting with our motion capture cast, we had started to receive work from ILM that actually showed proof of concept that this was actually going to work, and it looked like this, and it was amazing, and the faces looked real, and they looked like the performances that our actors were giving.
And
so I think
you always had though, but you remember now, but you always had a life-size statue
of
the orcs, so that was always on set to remember.
Yeah, for scale and mass, we had that on set, so that you'd always know that.
That was way before.
And so that's the adjustment, is we are now allowed to interact with the actors. Whereas before we would have to go into a volume with the cameras and just do the performance and watch a tape of them you know, so now we get to do the live thing. It gives it a real performance. It gives it more genuine feeling.
So I think my very last question is, so the game World of Warcraft, I feel like changed people's lives. Like people got married, like met and got married off of this game in the real world. Yeah. I think people hold it in a dear place in their hearts. So what's one thing that you hope people take away from the film?
They're trash.
And we're done. All right, thank you so much.
Look, I think one of the things that was great about the game of Warcraft, both the old one and the World of Warcraft, was that heroes you can play as the hero on all sides, and I like that idea that you can be the hero, you know, no matter where you come from. The most unexpected people, the most unexpected places, that's where the heroes can be. And I know that sounds a little, you know, I don't know, optimistic, wishful thinking, but I like that.
I like it too. Romantic.
Cool. Well, thank you all so much. Oh, sorry. Did you?
No.
Oh, no. All right.
We're going.
Yeah. So thank you all so much for joining us, and go see Warcraft in the theaters.
Toby does have one question about search and whether people would know what he's been searching for on the internet. He said
nobody answer. Nobody answer this question,
Google
please.
to be like, bigboobs.com. I was like, oh man.
Does it matter
Yeah,
if you
the
erase your
shame.
history?
I like big boobs. I'm so sorry. That's what I felt. I felt like a trap. But when I saw you all here, I realized that you're all on my teams. I felt good.
Great. Thank you so much for joining us.